Hi guys, today we're going to focus in on our recovery nutrition and how we can improve it to make sure that we're ready and able to train or compete as soon after as we need to. So in terms of what we spoke about last week and the carbohydrates, that's a huge piece of the recovery puzzle, making sure that we refuel and make sure our energy stores are sufficient to sustain or support a really high quality performance in the next training session or the next competition. Um, so that's a huge piece of the puzzle. I don't go into it in huge detail here today, but it's definitely one to watch back and make sure that you're focusing in on here when it comes to recovery. In terms of some of the signs in relation to like poor recovery, these would be common ones that we tend to see. So an increase in feelings of fatigue or tiredness day to day, that might be a case that in your everyday life, in school, college, or work, you feel a bit more tired than normal, not able to fully concentrate or focus because you feel tired. And that can be a sign that you've done a hard training session the night before, you've been in a higher training block of time, and you just haven't recovered fully after doing it. So one to look out for. Another would be, like, again, an example of how that fatigue might present would be if you were doing a training session that would typically be very easy to you, but suddenly it becomes quite difficult and you actually find it hard to complete it. And that can be a sign that over the course of maybe the last couple of days or weeks, you've just been slight bit off in terms of your recovery nutrition habits. And that has led to a bit of a deficit or a gap in the refueling side of things, which has led to the fatigue. And then that's why it's a bit harder to complete the training session that was typically easy. Obviously enough, if you're tired and you're fatigued, you can't give absolutely everything to the training session that you're trying to do or to your performances within competition environment. So it might present as like a reduction in the performances that you're used to having. And that can, I suppose, just again, it causes a bit of a chance to reflect and say, okay, do I have everything in place here from a recovery nutrition perspective? If you aren't able to give absolutely everything to training sessions, um, and you're not recovering fully, or you're not given the building blocks you need to adapt to the training stimulus that you've given, what you might see is that what you may have planned in terms of development and goals, whether it be in the gym or in the field environment, you mightn't be hitting those targets, and that can be, again, as a result of just slightly being off in terms of the recovery nutrition, and subsequently then just not adapting as planned. The other one then that most of us would kind of be aware of or know will be increased muscle soreness. So more pains and aches after training sessions. And what might happen is if you're not recovering fully between sessions, it might actually just take you a bit longer. So rather than it being you're not sore within 12 hours, it might be a case of it being 24, 36 hours before you're actually fully right and ready to go for the next training session. And the other one is that kind of recurrence of colds or flus across the course of a season. And why that becomes a bit more prevalent, and why recovery nutrition is important, is that when we exercise, we suppress our immune system function, or we downregulate it. And the recovery nutrition plays an important part in upregulating it and making sure that we're not open to the colds or the flus. So again, there are a couple of signs that we can look out for and assess whether our recovery is sufficient or not. In terms of addressing it and working on making sure that our recovery is sufficient, it boils down to 4 R's of recovery. So refuel with carbohydrates, rehydrating with fluids and electrolytes, repairing with protein, and then rest, which is just relaxing, switching off, finding your way to just completely relax and be um, chilled out, I suppose. In terms of the priorities, I suppose, from a nutrition perspective, the order in which they're listed there, I suppose, is because number one and number two, refuel and rehydrate, are the most important pieces in making sure that you're ready to go for the next training session. So if you've underfueled after a training session and you've not fully rehydrated, they're the two that are most likely to prevent you from being able to perform to your best in the next training session. In the long term, trying to adapt to the training stimulus and make sure that your body is building strong, healthy bones and muscle, the repair piece is obviously really important, but that's definitely a long burner type piece where you just make sure there's protein in there. It's not one that will result in you not being able to perform in subsequent training sessions, whereas the refuel and the rehydrate are the ones that will stop you from being able to perform in the next sessions. You want to try and start as soon after training as you can. So if you have a window of time where you might be traveling from a training venue to home, so it might be an hour and a half before you get home to have a decent feed, trying to fill that gap is really important. So something along the lines of, would say, milk and a banana would be perfect just to plug the gap, or it might be a sandwich or a roll that you have there, and that just allows you some time to get home and to get a balanced meal on the plate and to fully refuel and repair. But in the immediate aftermath, in the minutes after, the focus should be on a carbohydrate and a fluid source. So that's why the likes of a milkshake will be perfect in there. So this session, I suppose, that's the carbohydrate component discussed. And now we push on into and we focus in on the rehydrate and the repair. But always bear in mind that the refuel is the most important piece to make sure that you're ready and you have enough energy in the tank for the next training session that you're going to do. And if you're training sooner than, so say you have a 12-hour turnaround, that refuel becomes more important than if you had a 24-hour turnaround. So you can take it more gradually over 24 hours in terms of eating carbohydrates than if you have a 12-hour turnaround time. In terms of hydration and rehydration, so we discussed it last week, and definitely like making sure that you're hydrated going into the session is the best start point that you want to be in. So making sure that your urine sits between 1 and 3 on the scale there, so pale to clear color, and you know, making sure that you have a pint of fluid in the 2 hours before exercise is really important to ensuring you're hydrated when you're exercising. In terms of the rehydration process, the recommendation, I suppose, is 1.5 liters for every kilogram that you lose in terms of weight. So if you weighed yourself pre and post, you'll work out how much you've lost through sweat, how much fluid you've lost through sweat, and you want to replace that by 1.5 liters. That's over the course of the next 5 hours after that training session. So it can be, I suppose, harder to achieve that if you're training late in the evening time. So that's why it's important to mix up your fluids and to add in, let's say, the likes of a pinch of salt in a drink with some dilute to try and absorb as much of the fluids as you can before you go to sleep. You don't want to be drinking a huge amount of water at that hour because that may disrupt your sleep, and again that then plays into under recovery. So it's about finding a balance here. We're aware that 1.5 liters is a huge amount for every kilo lost, and that it might not be possible depending on what time you're training at. If you're training in the morning, it is possible, but if you're training in the evening time, it's a bit more difficult. So the likes of milkshakes, fruit smoothies, water with some dilute and a pinch of salt in it are all brilliant ways to mix up your fluids and to make sure that you're getting a mixture of electrolytes which help to then retain the water in the body and rehydrate you properly. So that is how I'd go after the rehydration side of things. Um, and that's, quite simple in terms of the snacks, because if you're using fruit smoothies or milkshakes, they're forming a part of the refuel process and the repair process as well. So it ticks a couple of boxes there for you. In terms of the protein component, we need to consider a couple of different bits and pieces. So the most important is the total amount across your whole day. And that's, you know, a set number, but it's across your whole day, and the total amount of it is the most important part. Then you can look at the timing of it and how you would ideally like to see it spread across the day. And then you can look at the sources of it as well. But ultimately, the total amount is important in terms of muscle development and good bone development as well in the long run. In the immediate aftermath, so in the couple of hours after training, combining the carbohydrates with the protein actually help with the absorption of protein and the repair process. So that's why it's important to have that balanced meal on the plate soon after training. And because the combination of the two, they actually help each other and make the recovery process that bit easier. In terms of how much you want, in terms of a total amount, you're looking at anywhere between 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram across the day. And protein provides the main building blocks. So if you're thinking on all the different colored Lego blocks there, protein provides you with all those different colors to try and build strong muscles and strong bones. And it also helps to support your immune system then and make sure it's functioning properly. In terms of um, the amount of protein, then if you want to fully turn on the recovery process and like maximally switch on the building and recovery, you're looking at a serving of about 20 grams being needed. So that's roughly the equivalent of 100 to 120 grams of a lean meat, or 150 grams of a cottage cheese or a quark or a Greek yogurt will give you that, or 2 to 3 eggs, or sorry, 3 to 4 eggs will give you about 20 grams as well. And then other options in terms of type would be your soy-based products, because they're the best alternative in terms of non-dairy sources, and then a mixture of beans, lentils, and legumes, so that you get all those different building blocks in place. So that's one of the things just about the beans, lentils, and legumes. You want to try and have a combination of them, or nuts and seeds, the same combination of them, so that you get all the different amino acids, which are your building blocks. Whereas the lean meats and the dairy produce and the eggs give you all those in one punch. And as you see there, just from the boys building with the Lego blocks, it's that red block, the leucine block, which is important to switch on your muscle recovery and make sure that you start to rebuild protein, rebuild the muscle tissue. So that's why you'll get enough of it if you get a 20-gram serving of protein. So once you have the total amount of protein boxed off and you're getting enough total protein across your whole day, and you have a variety of types of protein coming in there, so for a mixture of sources providing you with a mixture of building blocks, then you can start to look at the distribution of it throughout the day. This is one of the kind of end pieces, I suppose, when it comes to recovery. But looking at how you spread it across the day, ideal scenario is that every 3 to 4 hours you have a protein-rich meal or snack. And what that then does is push you above the line here into the green, which is where muscle building and bone health, bone development happens. And the more often you can be above that, the greater the adaptation in the long run to the training that you're doing. So the ideal is that you're above the line more than you're below it, in the red, which is where muscle breakdown happens. But again, in terms of your immediate recovery and making sure that you're ready for the very next session, it's about carbohydrates and it's about rehydrating with fluids and electrolytes. The protein intake is very, very much about your long-term outlook. It's about long-term adaptation to the training you're doing, and it's about building strong and healthy foundations in terms of muscle and bone health. And again, when it comes to the competition window, it pulls back to the carbohydrates, um, to refuel you and make sure that you're able to support the performances in the competition environment. Now, one of the things that we hit on already was just combining protein and carbohydrates for the absorption. So they help each other in terms of absorbing into the body and then helping with the refuel process. So if you can combine carbohydrates and proteins in snacks and in meals after a competition performance, then that will help with the refuel process and get you ready for the next round or the next bout as soon as possible. And we often refer to ratios with the carbs to protein in that window of time. So either a 2:1 or a 3:1 ratio. So for every 20 grams of protein you have twice that in carbohydrates. So it would be 40 grams of carbohydrates. And what that might look like would be the likes of a wrap in there in the immediate aftermath of the 0 to 30 minute window, or it could be fruit smoothie, which would have some milk in there, some yogurt, and then a couple of pieces of fruit, mixed berries, and a bit of honey as well. What you're doing there is, if you're doing the smoothie or the milkshake, you're getting a mixture of your fluids and electrolytes from the milk, and then you're also getting the carbohydrates, which is brilliant from ticking off those main two boxes of immediate recovery. And then you will have some protein in there to help with absorption, but also to help with some of the third hour of recovery. And then in terms of the follow-up meal, again, combining both the carbs and the protein. If you have another round sooner, then a 3:1 type ratio would be good. Or if you have a second day of competition, then a 3:1 type ratio would be brilliant, because it means that you're getting more fuel in for the next round of events. Overall, in terms of our 4 hours of recovery, we want all of them in there. So we want to cover the 4 hours every day. But in terms of making sure that you're ready to go for the next training session you're about to do, it's about the refuel and the rehydrate. And making sure that they're really, really good is the best place to start. And then you can look at the total quantity of protein and then the distribution of it. With the rest and the relaxation, it's about finding your off switch. So how do you just completely switch off and relax? And that's what you want to do. And that might be out with friends, or it might be going to the cinema, might be playing PlayStation, or watching movies, or enjoying some time with family, or enjoying a meal. And all those different modalities, or listening to music or reading a book, they're ways for you to switch off, and they form a part of the whole recovery process. So the recipe to fit in with this week's theme will be a fruit smoothie, and we'll also make an omelette. The fruit smoothie will be ideal for that 0 to 30 minute window after exercise. It'll provide carbohydrates for a refuel, and it'll provide liquids and electrolytes for our rehydration. It'll also provide some micronutrients, which will help with our immune function. It'll help with our repair process as well. And then we'll make an omelette, which will be our main protein source in our meal. And we'll combine that with a couple of slices of bread for, again, a refuel opportunity. I hope you enjoy the recipe, and I'll see you next time.